Chapter 81 Adonis' Hidden Truth. This will be too easy. Adam's eyes bulged as he raised his blade above his head. He had never stabbed someone, but he had seen enough violent movies to know how it was done. He just had to thrust the dagger into Adonis' chest, and apparently, the blade would do the rest of the work. Adam could feel saliva form in his mouth. Whether this was due to him salivating, or merely a sign of nervousness, it was impossible to tell. One thing was certain, though. I have to do this. Adam had already made up his mind. His eyes gave off a murderous glare to represent this, and he strengthened his muscles as he prepared for the thrust. It's nothing personal, Adonis, he mouthed, though his wide grin told a different story. I just gotta do it. Whoosh. The blade sliced through the dark space around it as it descended to complete its task. As it fell, Adam's eyes widened even further, as if waiting for the first sight of blood and guts gushing out of his target. Much to his inescapable shock, that was not meant to happen. Clang. The dagger was met with a golden field that surrounded Adonis' sleeping body, instantly causing the blade to shatter apart upon impact. What? Adam immediately forgot the need to remain silent as he witnessed the impossible. The dagger's pieces instantly disintegrated into golden light, completely overwhelmed by the power of the field that was struck. Before Adam could completely recover from the shock, however, he suddenly felt something grab on his throat. The blurry movement of Adonis' hand had been too fast for his distracted eyes to register, so he didn't notice it until it was too late. Until Adonis' grip was completely pressed around his throat. So you finally showed yourself, class traitor. As the odd, but familiar voice echoed in Adam's ears, he saw Adonis open his eyes. Golden light radiated from them as he sat upright, almost as if he was being pulled by an invisible force that was too much to comprehend. He's awake. What? Not only that, but it sounded as though Adonis was expecting him. You arrived a bit earlier than I expected. But, after the entire trial with Ray, I figured you would act pretty soon. Adam could not understand what Adonis was talking about. I suppose the future has slightly deviated off course. Future? Deviated? What in the world was Adonis talking about? Gurg. As Adam tried to speak, his throat was further crushed by Adonis' single-handed choke. Things weren't meant to happen like this, but I can't complain at this point. The whole goal was to change the future. So I should expect slight changes to the original timeline. Upon hearing these words, Adam felt like he could figure out what Adonis was trying to imply. Unfortunately, his brain wasn't getting enough oxygen for him to properly think straight. Adam felt his heart race uncontrollably. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. His thoughts screamed out. The Adonis he knew would never hurt him, but something about the new vibe that came off of this new Adonis told Adam that he wouldn't hesitate to take his life. The very thought frightened him. I know you probably want me to spare you right now, despite you just attempting to kill me. If it was me back then, I would have surely done so. Adam felt his heart increase its pace as he heard this. I was so naive back then, he whispered. Adam saw some measure of hesitation in Adonis' eyes, and for a moment, he thought he actually had a chance. His brain was so busy trying to survive that it didn't fully process Adonis' words. It just desperately clung to any sign of his survival. But I can't allow you to live. If I do, you'll exploit another opportunity and betray everyone. Adam had certainly thought of that many times. Just like last time, you'll join their side. That would only result in more suffering and needless sacrifices. Adonis closed his eyes for a second before opening them once again. This time, the golden radiance in his eyes glowed much brighter than ever. "I can't allow that, not after coming back to save everyone," he whispered. "To make sure this world survives, I have to eliminate you right here and now." Once Adam saw the resolute expression on Adonis' face, he instantly knew his fate was sealed. Wait. Don't kill me." He tried to yell out, but only muffled screams escaped his lips. "It's not my fault. I was put up to this. My partner, that son of a bitch, was the one who wanted this. Not me. I never wanted this. You should kill him instead." Adam desperately wanted to live, but he could not. So long as Adonis willed it, it was so. A golden ray of light filled the room, and a blade of magnificent beauty and power manifested in Adonis' previously unoccupied hand. Its presence was unrivaled, its purity unmatched. This was the divine sword, a weapon fit only for a hero like Adonis. "Forgive me, Adam, for the little time that we spent together. Whoosh. You were my precious classmate." Blood splattered all around the room as Adam's body completely disintegrated, leaving his head floating in the air. Adonis still tightly gripped it, not letting it go for a second despite how coldly he stared at it. "And so it ends," he whispered. All along, Adonis knew there was a mastermind in their class who was pulling the strings. Why? Because this was exactly what happened the last time. There are slight alterations, but for the most part things are proceeding as they should. Adonis knew all that would happen after this, or at least, most of it. That was how he was able to tell that Ray was innocent. How he knew everything he knew, including how to address Seraph, and their importance to the denizens of this world. How he knew he had to be hero. Everyone should still be asleep. Adonis' thoughts trailed as he traced his gaze away from Adam's pathetic head. The fluid motion of the divine sword had barely made any sound, so Adonis was convinced his attack hadn't caused any ruckus outside. "I can't have that," he whispered. It was better to cause a big ruckus and explain what had happened in a more exaggerated way so as to show everyone the intensity of the situation. That way, he wouldn't be labeled as a cold-blooded killer. "I really didn't mean for this to happen." Adonis had tried his best to keep his classmates together, to put them in check. He tried his best to check up on all of them, making sure they all felt safe and protected. More than anything, he had hoped none of the tragedies of the past would reveal itself again. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. "It can't be helped. More is coming, so I must prepare." As he said this, the divine sword glowed. Adonis was about to release a mighty blast that would gather enough attention. He didn't mean to lie, or deceive his classmates. However, for the sake of the world. As his door was blown away by the blast, and several blocks of debris scattered around, Adonis maintained his expression of resolve. "This must be done. Asterisk. Asterisk. Asterisk." End of Arc 1, The Summoned Otherworlders Arc. Chapter 82. After the incident. Silence. That was what came first. Uncomfortable, overwhelming silence that sank into the depths of the minds of everyone who was witnessing what the fallen ones saw. Then, once silence was all worn out, the next thing that came was horror. Within the darkness of the royal dungeon, the fallen heroes could only helplessly watch as an overwhelming shadow stood before them. The silhouette of a massive monstrosity that radiated nothing but sheer malevolence. This would be the first time they were encountering such a thing. And from the looks of it, it was fated to be their last. A few days had passed since the entire incident with Adonis. Everyone was initially horrified and perplexed by what they saw, but after Adonis collapsed before them barely breathing as he explained the situation, they could all understand better. It seemed one of their own, Adam Sanchez, had plotted to kill Adonis. His skill responded in automatic self-defense and killed Adam before even the hero could tell what was happening. As Adonis described what had happened, it felt like he was sleepwalking. The sensation felt unreal. Of course, none of these explanations that were given took away the weight of a classmate's death. It was still a tragedy. However, learning that Adam was going to kill Adonis, and that Adonis wasn't in control of his actions, was enough to change the reactions of everyone. The look of horror they gave Adonis soon faded, and the uncomfortably image of their beheaded classmate eventually took on a different flavor. He deserved it, didn't he? What was he after? Why would he attack Adonis? Maybe he was working for the enemy. These were the words that now went around the lips and ears of the classmates. Before long, Adam was seen as no more than a scapegoat, and Adonis was praised as the martyr. And now, 3 days later, so much had changed. So, what now, Ray? Noah and Ray sat in the latter's room. There was only one reason why these two would meet like this. It was to discuss business. We've not been able to sell monster cores for 3 days now. Ever since that incident. Among the students, there were still a few who found it difficult to properly articulate what happened that night. Noah Sherlock was one of them. Since Adam was killed by Adonis? Say it as it is, Noah. This sharp response came from none other than Ray. He had a calm expression on his face, almost as if none of this fazed him in the slightest. His dull black eyes seemed to be staring at something invisible far away as he casually addressed the very incident that shook their entire group. Don't say it like that, Ray. Someone died, you know. Noah snapped, a bead of sweat trickling down his cheek as he uttered those words without realizing it. His eyes widened the moment he realized what he had done. Ray's sharp gaze now rested on him, instantly prompting him to take a few steps back. Sorry. For raising my voice. He whispered. It's fine. I understand what you're saying, Noah, but we can't allow ourselves to be bogged down by something like this. From Ray's perspective, Adam had been nothing more than a stranger to him. He was also a stranger to Noah. There was no need to let his demise affect the relevant areas of their lives. It's unfortunate that his death has affected business in some ways. The entire royal estate was in lockdown, and they had even activated the Grand Barrier, a protective dome of energy that encased the entire estate in hard light. It was a more powerful and sophisticated version of what was used for the royal dungeon site. The students were monitored 24/7, and they were meant to be accounted for at all times. Thanks to that, Ray and Noah could not continue business as usual. A few students protested that this was ridiculous, but Grandmaster Conrad and the rest of the council personally pleaded for everyone's understanding. It's just for a few days. They had promised. The reason for their sudden and extreme reactions to the event wasn't too difficult to see. An Otherworlder was dead. Otherworlders were the nation's only chance at facing the dragons, and they had just lost one valuable asset. That realization was enough to make them waste valuable resources to keep their barrier up and running while breaching the liberty of the very champions they had previously sucked up to. Desperation was a dangerous thing, especially when met with a sense of danger. The United Human Alliance didn't want to lose any more of the remaining 28, so they were trying their best to do damage control. They were also going to be extremely thorough to make sure nothing like this ever repeated itself. It's a mess, isn't it? All of this is just HAAA. But I can't complain too much. Ray's monotone broke the tense silence that existed between him and Noah. After all, thanks to this incident, I'm finally free from my charges. With Adam dead and confirmed to be a malefactor, it only went to prove that Ray had been falsely accused all along. Once Adonis provided testimony about the presence of an enchanted dagger with Adam, and also the proof of the stealth necklace that he wore, it was clear that Adam had broken the rules. The possibility of him obtaining an enchanted item to bypass the truth seeker was also brought to light. After searching Adam's room, they found the very device that he had used to get away with lying. They even found money hidden there. FIDDU up TS on nov/Elincom. All of these elements went to show that Adam had been pulling the strings and lying about a lot of things, all so he could reach Adonis. Ray had only been one of his victims. Now that I'm no longer under house arrest, I can move more freely. Unfortunately, that freedom is useless for now. As long as the barrier was still in place, Ray and his classmates were stuck in the royal estate. However, Ray didn't appear upset about this in the slightest. They can only maintain all this for so long. He told Noah, his expression that showed how confident he was in his grand scheme. Sooner or later, they'll let us out. Ray's smile began to creep wider as he closed his lips. And that's when I'll have my chance. Asterisk. Chapter 83 Torn Between Choices. Good morning, esteemed Otherworlders. It's really good to see you all in good health. Right now, Ray and his classmates were standing in the open fields of their training ground. All 28 of them were facing Grandmaster Conrad, who had Brutus and Luciel to his right and left respectively. Conrad had a calm smile on his face as his long hair danced with the wind. As usual, he was adorned in expensive jewelry and pristine clothing. There was no one who would doubt that this man was royalty. I am grateful for you being accommodating and understanding. You've been subjected to a lot of restrictions, and I am deeply honored that you chose to be patient with us. Truthfully, if it hadn't been for Adonis calming the students down, there would have been a lot more resistance to the actions of the Royal Council. After Adam's demise, it was clear that something had changed in the power balance. The desperation of the United Human Alliance began to show, while the students grew a lot more uneasy about their place in the estate. This ultimately led to a shift in the status quo. Right now, it was clear that the United Human Alliance had more to lose from letting the students go, and they had to be a lot more active in their management of their champions. That was why Conrad, Grandmaster that he was standing out in the open to address the Otherworlders. All of that changes today. We will cease the barriers, and we will even allow you to explore outside the royal estate as you please. As Conrad said all this, the annoyed countenance of a lot of students began to change. Smiles and little chuckles began to reveal themselves among the dreary ones. It felt like a miracle. As the students murmured among one another in excitement, one of them was also grinning like an idiot, though his thoughts were far from what he showed. What a farce. Ray was the one who had this thought, and for good reason. He's making it sound like he's doing us a favor when, in fact, he has no other option. Ray's classmates, that is, the esteemed Otherworlders, were nearing the limits of what they could take from the Royal Council. With their power weakening, it was clear that they had to make some compromises. Speaking of compromises, I'm sure they've run out of mana crystals to power the Grand Barrier, or they're pretty low on their supply. That's why they're stopping the barrier. Yet, the way Conrad made it sound, one would think it was a voluntary decision. I can see through you guys. It's almost sad how desperate these people are once you peel a single layer off. Underneath all that finesse was a nation that desperately needed saving. And I'm sure Adonis recognizes that too. That's why he's still on their side despite how crafty they think they're being. In the end, these people required help. It's not just Conrad and the people here that will suffer if the dragons aren't stopped. Millions of people, if not more, will perish. For that reason alone, Ray felt his conscience was geared towards helping out more than it was directed towards his selfish interests. I've pretty much gotten all I can get from these people right now. Ray had used on the strongest people here and obtained their useful skills, and he now had access to the abilities of all his classmates as well. He had learned enough about this world that he was fairly confident he could survive in this world with the current knowledge at his disposal. Logically speaking, they had nothing else to offer. Maybe if I take account for future events, then maybe I can benefit a thing or two. However, compared to the abstract future benefits he still wasn't certain about, there were concrete prospects he could pursue now. I could get my own place and operate on my schedule. That meant he could live his life without the prying eyes and sniveling noses of his comrades weighing down on him. More importantly, though, he would finally have more time on his hands. Training has become pretty useless to me at this point. And honestly, I could better spend my time grinding in the dungeon. Ray found himself thinking. If he spent more time fighting monsters, he was guaranteed to get more results. And this wasn't even a necessarily selfish decision. The stronger I am, the more useful I can be to this world. In essence, it was for their own good. But not yet. There were two major reasons why Ray was yet to cut off ties with the royal estate and his classmates. The first and most obvious reason to him was his desire to identify the true malefactor of the recent incidents that had ensued. My trial, Adam's death, and now this. It all felt too unnatural and coordinated that Ray couldn't shake off the feeling that someone was behind all of this. The one that framed me isn't Adam. It couldn't have been him. There's a good chance that they manipulated Adam and made him take the fall so they could cover their tracks. How convenient was it that they were able to nab Adam for everything and solve the mystery of the malefactor so easily? Something was fishy, and Ray couldn't get it out of his head. I can't just leave everyone with the malefactor among them. Ray didn't really care much for his classmates, but that didn't mean he was comfortable with them being played by an unknown enemy. Besides, he had managed to form some sort of relationship with a few people during the time he spent in this world. Noah, Adonis, Trisha. And then Alicia. Which brought him to the second, more sentimental reason, why he was hesitant to leave. I don't feel comfortable leaving her behind. Even though Ray knew that Alicia was unaware of his true abilities, and that she wanted to return home if she could, he couldn't help but feel an irrational attachment to her. He found himself glancing in her direction, and much to his dismay, she was also looking at him. She gave him a smile, and he found himself breaking into one as well. I'm happy she's feeling much better after witnessing that gory. Hold on, what am I thinking? He found himself giving his biggest internal sigh. Ray knew he was being stupid. You're not her type of guy, Ray. It's best to focus on improving yourself and maybe you can come back once you're good enough. Even though he had told himself this many times, Ray couldn't still bring himself to numb his feelings. That's right. Ray was in love. Or at least, he felt like was. Our connection is real. I can feel it. If we weren't interrupted that night, then maybe. Those immensely emotional thoughts were stopped by Ray's more negative line of reasoning. You would have embarrassed yourself by admitting your feelings, Ray. The best thing you can do now is focus on the grind. Right now, he was at war with himself. Perhaps that was why he didn't pay attention. to any other thing Conrad said until 3 words reverberated in his ears. Royal Dungeon Expedition. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Chapter 84, A Bit of Motivation. The Royal Dungeon Expedition. It was supposed to happen 4 days ago, but after Adam's sudden death, the entire thing was cancelled. Everything went on lockdown, and no one in the Royal Council, or the entire alliance as a whole, mentioned it after that. Until now. After giving it much thought, we have decided to proceed with the Royal Dungeon Expedition plan. Grandmaster Conrad's voice echoed in the air. His words caused Ray to jerk back to reality, the latter's eyes blinking numerous times. Truthfully speaking, we need you all to advance in both power and experience, and training won't be enough. Conrad took a short moment to exhale before continuing. That is why the Royal Dungeon Expedition is our best bet. There's no better place to gain experience than in a dungeon. Dungeons were crawling with monsters who had a diverse set of abilities. A lot of floors, especially the topmost ones, had one set of monsters per floor, but the deeper one went, the more there tended to be a variety of monsters occupying a single floor. Of course, it went without saying that the deeper floors were far more challenging. I can see the look of apprehension on your faces, but you don't need to fret too much. Luciel and Brutus will be accompanying, so you'll all be safe. Those words were enough to assuage the concerns of many students, but they weren't completely bought over. After all, after seeing one of the die, everyone was reminded of their own mortality. As well as the words Adam had said when he was still alive. I don't want to do this anymore. Someone finally snapped, and a voice echoed out to prove it. Conrad paused as he glanced in the direction of this random student. It must have taken a lot of bravery to utter those words. However, the moment he did so, the brewing storm exploded. Me too. I think I'll just call it quits and fend off on my own. I don't care if you kick me out. I think it beats dying in some dangerous place. Can't we just go back home? Voices like this began to escape the lips of the audience, and before anyone knew what, the entire group had descended into chaos. More than half of the students wanted to call it quits, and it didn't seem like the numbers were going to reduce anytime soon. In fact, more students trickled in to join their ranks. This is bad. Ray thought to himself as he observed the divide. Thanks to the words of that single guy, everyone has started spiraling out of control. It had escalated to the point where it wasn't even easy to pinpoint who started all of the drama, to begin with. At this rate, nearly all the students were going to leave the royal estate before the day ran out. May I have your attention, please? A voice suddenly radiated out. It had so much presence that the loud commotion instantly came to a halt. Everyone who was raising their voice, or arguing, or merely shouting ceased their outcry, all because of one young man. I can understand your plight. I know your fears, and I can feel your worries. The boy who spoke wasn't a stranger to them. He had been with them through thick and thin, and ever since they arrived in this world he had represented all of them fairly. He fought for their rights, he encouraged them when they were down. He was there with them through it all. Every single student felt the boy's words ring true within them, as if he was speaking to only them as individuals and not the group. His name was Adonis Levi, hero and leader of the Otherworlders. This world needs help. I won't force you to care about the countless families and numerous children that require protection in the city alone, talk less of the many others that exist beyond. Adonis' tone was not pretentious or hypocritical. He spoke from his heart, and people listened. We all have our desires and goals. It's rather unfortunate that those desires were cut short during that accident back home. Adonis returned the memories of everyone to the incident that started it all. We were meant to die back then. All of us. The faces of the students began to fall. Their pompous and entitled facade cracked under the weight of his words. We were saved by the summoning of these desperate people. Our desires and dreams were preserved by the denizens of this reality. People who also have their own dreams and ambitions. Adonis' golden eyes glimmered as he formed a slight frown. The dragons don't care about those dreams, not ours, and certainly not theirs. They will trample everything underfoot and destroy everything in their path. The reality of the enemy that they inevitably had to face began to manifest. Adonis painted it too vividly. And once they are done desecrating all that can be desecrated, and they snuff out the last dream and hopes of the people of this world, who do you think they will turn to next? His gaze was serious, calm, undeterred, but serious. You are not safe. I am not safe. None of us are safe. Not until those monsters are gone. Then, the only question that was left to ask was how. How could they stop these horrid creatures? How could they preserve their dreams and be safe? Well, the answers lay before them. We need the dungeon. We will be able to level up and gain actual experience from it. Adonis stretched out both of his hands, as if expecting a hug. The despairing expressions of the students were already beginning to fade away. Even the selfish ones who only cared about their safety could not deny the allure of gaining more strength to protect themselves. That is why I implore all of you, my friends. Let us not abandon this opportunity. As Adonis gave a brilliant smile, filled with confidence and eye-shaking resolve, the last of the resistance was quelled. The dissatisfied sound of a clicked tongue silently echoed, but it was drowned by the overwhelming voice of Adonis. So please, don't give up now. Don't give in after you've endured all this time. Memories of the training they underwent to get stronger flashed in the minds of the students. How could they throw all of that away now? Stand with me. With us. We can't do this without you. And honestly. Adonis slowly dropped his two hands and slowly shook his head. You can't do this without us. The rest was history after that. Cheers and roars of excitement arose from the students. It was as if everyone found their source of motivation and forgot the fear that coursed through their hearts. They could only think about Adonis and his words. Will you stand with me? The answer was obvious. We will stand with you. Everyone cheered. Ray was among the majority and went along with their excitement as if he was swept up in the moment. He smiled and roared with so much energy that you would think he meant every ounce of it. But, that wasn't really the case. Good job, Adonis. You've managed to keep everyone together again. He truly was impressed by Adonis. It almost felt like they weren't even the same age at all. However, despite all of this, a dark thought crept within Ray's mind. This solution is only temporary, though. Unease among the students was bound to keep growing until it became unstoppable. At that stage, not even the best of pep talks, even from someone like Adonis, would be able to do the trick. Ray thought in worry. And, just as he feared, that moment was coming soon. It was only a matter of time. Asterisk. Asterisk. Thanks for reading. Chapter 85 Plan for the Excursion. Grandmaster Conrad was stunned. Never before had he been outdone in negotiations of any kind. When the dragons struck all those years ago, he was the one who banded the nations together through sheer negotiations by exploiting their overarching common interests. He always knew what people wanted, and how to give it to them without being at a disadvantage himself. However, most of this was only possible due to a somewhat even playing field or him possessing the advantage. In the case of the Otherworlders, the script was mostly flipped. They had the control. And it seems they're realizing it now. It somehow pissed Conrad off that they had spent so many resources on these Otherworlders, yet they were so quick to abandon him and his people. So much money, so many resources. Even their two strongest were assigned to training them, rather than going to the war front and assisting the nation. Then, there were expenses they were yet to incur that would go into benefiting the Otherworlders and their growth. After they had done so much, and were willing to do even more, it felt very heartbreaking that most of these individuals would abandon them in a heartbeat. It wasn't fair. But who would have thought the hero would turn the situation around? Conrad was relieved they had Adonis on their side. He was the strongest of the bunch, and as someone with the hero class, he was the perfect fit to take down their ultimate enemy. We just need to strengthen him enough to defeat the Dragon Emperor. Right now, however, Conrad had to give out another olive branch so the Otherworlders had another incentive to trust the United Human Alliance. We plan on letting you all explore the town freely today. No guards or entourage. Just all of you having unrestricted fun. Conrad could hear surprised gasps from his audience, and he smiled softly. They've been feeling the weight of our security measures a lot. This way, they'll see that we trust them. Besides, with Adonis in the group, they wouldn't be able to run away or cause any kind of commotion. And if any of them were to do that, then that would mean they were never going to fight the dragons for us. It was better to know who to spend their resources on, and who would abandon them at the first sight of the dragons. Luciel and Brutus here will go and scout the royal dungeon and prepare it for your training tomorrow. In that effect, you should all gather among yourselves and decide how your excursion should go. Once Conrad made the statement, he knew his job was done. The students looked satisfied, and while the problem of cooperation wasn't completely solved, he knew a first step had been taken. I shall now be taking my leave. The students waved him off and Conrad smiled while leaving with his two executives. The dungeon can be a very difficult place to explore. By having Luciel and Brutus check the place out, we can ensure the overall safety of our biggest assets. Right now, only the first 5 floors of the royal dungeon were being explored and exploited. In the far past, long before Conrad's time, he had heard the lower parts were also explored by knights and adventurers. But that time had long passed. Now that we have the Otherworlders, we can make up for our lack of manpower and finally focus our efforts on conquering more floors. The Otherworlders would grow stronger in the process, and more resources would finally be available for the Alliance to use. Our stockpiles are running out, and the materials being refined now are both of lesser quality and quantity than before. If they wanted a fighting chance, they had to focus their efforts on the royal dungeon. It wasn't like there weren't other dungeons, but the situation behind those were complicated. The ones in the Adventurer City were where a lot of their higher grade materials came from, but since the adventurers were usually more interested in growing stronger and hunting more monsters, they poured a lot of valuable resources into their equipment and fortifications. If not for the tax that the Royal Council had imposed on them, they wouldn't be getting as much benefits from the city as they were. Some adventurers were even circumventing the tax policy, but Conrad's hands were too full to deal with that at the moment. Right now, we just need to focus our efforts on these ones. Conrad stole one final glance at the Otherworlders as he further distanced himself from them. They're the only ones who can do it. Once Conrad and the two strongest of the alliance, Adonis got the attention of everyone and addressed the students in his usual way. He was confident, articulate, and he managed to relate with everyone on a seemingly personal level. A lot of people were engaged in what he was saying concerning the excursion they would be having in the city. There were a bunch of things they all needed to get ready for the journey, like bags, and some money in case they had to get something. Since the other worlders had no money, Adonis told them they would have to get some from the treasury. Normally, that would be absurd, but once they explained things to the royal treasurer, and told them of what the Grand Master instructed, he would have no choice but to hear them out. We even have a royal permit. That way, even if we're lost or stuck somewhere in town, we can always use it to find our way back to the estate. Adonis had also added. Needless to say, it would take another hour or so before the students could leave the royal estate. This didn't seem like a big deal for a lot of students, but one in particular seemed fidgety. People might have looked at him and thought he was simply excited to explore the town, but they would be dead wrong. The reason for the students' anxiety lay elsewhere. Fuck. 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 Ray's thoughts echoed as he tried to control his widening eyes. The dungeon. My monster cores. The expedition was tomorrow, so he had initially thought there was time to gather his stuff and capitalize on his wealth before it was too late. However, he never expected one thing. Brutus and Luciel are going down there? They'll ruin everything. His thoughts echoed in despair. If they found his treasure, he would be toast. I can't allow that. If the Royal Council finds out so many monster cores exist, my business plans will be ruined. It seemed a tad selfish, but Ray couldn't allow his only current flow of benefits to be disrupted. Once we get to town, I'll have to split from everyone. That was the only move he could think of right now. Split and rush to the dungeon. Brutus and Luciel were going to be there, but if he could play his cards right and avoid them, he could evade them and get what he wanted. It's a bit early, but I'll have to finish those hobgoblins too. He was sure that they would have recovered the monster cores in the 8th floor by now. I just have to do it fast. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. What do you think? Will Ray be able to make it in time? Chapter 86, The Excursion. Alright, guys. Seems we're all set. Excitement could be seen on Adonis' face as he prepared to lead the students out of the castle gates. It felt like an odd thing, seeing Adonis so giddy. It was clearly his first time leaving, but it seemed to some perceptive eyes that he already knew what to look forward to in town. Since we're all dressed casually, they won't recognize us as special. The council hasn't also made the otherworlder summon public yet. The mages, and everyone else, who were involved in it took an oath of silence, so no one spoke of it outside the royal estate. Even the guards situated within the estate couldn't open their lips to anyone about it. If you ever get into trouble, just flash the royal badge. You all have them with you, right? So it should be fine. Once Adonis was done making these clarifications, and all seemed to be in order, everyone was pretty restless to leave. All right then. Let's go. The students ventured out, the hero at the forefront, with Billy and the alpha students closer to the front than the back, and a certain student trailing almost behind the entire group. That student was Ray. Okay. I've already told Noah the gist of matters. He's to conclude business for the day in the black market while I go to the royal dungeon. Ray wanted to make as many sales as possible. Since they could leave for town freely now, he knew more opportunities would come. He just didn't like to leave a day unproductive. I have over 1,000 platinum coins at my disposal right now. That was more than enough money for anyone. But for Ray, it still wasn't enough. He wanted more. Way more. His gaze was met with Noah's, and they both nodded subtly at each other. I just need to find the perfect opening. Ray knew it wouldn't be easy. He might have to get into more trouble, and he could even be under suspicion for his actions, but right now he was desperate. I have no choice. As long as there's no conclusive evidence, I can always squirm out of it. Plus, the entire United Human Alliance was in quite a delicate position with the Otherworlders already. Since Ray knew they were in desperate need for all the help they could get, Ray doubted they would make a big fuss about his whereabouts if he was able to rendezvous with the rest of the group as soon as possible. We're supposed to spend a total of 3 hours exploring the outside. That's more than enough time to go and come back. He just had to be extra careful about when to leave and when to return. That's the most complicated part right now. Ray bit his lip as he prayed he would be able to escape without notice. Adonis will be the biggest obstacle. His thoughts trailed in frustration. I just hope he won't make things too hard for me. Let me make it easy for you guys. We'll split up here, so you are all free to explore the town as long as we all meet up at this exact location 2 hours from now. Ray felt like his jaws would collapse the moment he heard Adonis say this. What? It was most unexpected. I mean, this whole arrangement works well for me, but it was the perfect, ideal situation for Ray's plan to ditch, but he couldn't help but think the decision was strange. Why in the world would he do this? Ray knew the reason Conrad didn't bother with the guards was because Adonis would be present to keep an eye on everyone. If he just allowed everyone to go off on their own, it betrayed his purpose of being there in the first place. Right? This is definitely strange. There's no way Adonis doesn't know all of this. Maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. A bunch of thoughts swirled around in Ray's head as he struggled to decide the best explanation for the current situation. Maybe he plans on watching all of us from a distance. Or maybe, could he have somewhere he wants to go privately? Ray dismissed the second thought because he knew this was the first time Adonis would be in town. This wasn't due to blind trust or anything, but the guy had an alibi. He was always seen training, and when he wasn't doing that, he was hanging out with everyone. Adonis didn't really have much time to himself, except when he slept. Maybe he snuck out at night one time or something. However, Ray found that equally difficult to believe. A high-profile guy like Adonis sneaking out? Seems unlikely. Not only did Adonis not have any stealth-based skills, but his status as hero and a stickler for the rules made it very doubtful that he would resort to such in the dead of night. Plus, it doesn't fit his personality. I'm sure if he asks the higher UPS, he'll be convincing enough that they'll let him go out. Ray didn't think Adonis would need to sneak out to leave town, and since this was the first official time he was here, there really wasn't a place that Adonis would particularly want to go to alone. F0 low new hafters at nov/l/ben/com. As such, Ray dismissed his second line of reasoning. That means it's maybe the first? But even that seems dubious. Why would Adonis want to watch everyone from the shadows, like a creep, when he could just watch them normally? Was it even a good plan to do so, considering the fact that Adonis had no stealth-based skills? It just seems like some unnecessary trouble. At this point, Ray had to consider the simpler third option that he had initially ignored due to his intense skepticism. Maybe he just wants everyone to have unrestricted fun, and he trusts everyone will stick to the rules. It seemed a bit too naive, but Adonis seemed like the guy who would hold such ideals. Besides, he just gave that badass speech. I'm sure most of the students wouldn't want to disappoint him or something. It made sense that his classmates, even with their respective agendas, would simply follow Adonis' instructions. A few might be late, but I doubt anyone would actively ignore the time limit. I'm sure the royal badge has some sort of tracking function, so as long as we have it on us, they can track us. Tracking magic consumed a lot of mana, though, especially if it was used consistently, so Ray was sure they would only utilize this magic in dire situations. Maybe after the 2 hours and some students are still absent. For now, though, Adonis seemed to have already thought things through. It just so happens to be convenient for me. Nice one, Adonis. Ray tried to hide his wide grin under the mask of his palm. You really are my hero. Looks like everyone has left. As Adonis looked around him, smiling to see his classmates were having fun in town, he nodded slowly to himself. Now that I'm here, and all alone, I can finally get that special item. It had been a while, but Adonis knew exactly where he had to go to obtain what he desired. The black market. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chapter 87 A little incident in town. Where is he? Alicia mumbled to herself as she looked around the town square, having the image of one person in mind. Ray. I thought he would want to hang out together. This would be the first time they were going to explore the town together, so she thought he would want to do it with her. They would check out the marketplace and even have tons of fun in this world. Like on a date. But he was nowhere to be found now. I guess I was the only one who was looking forward to this. As Alicia tried her best to dismiss her heavy thoughts, she felt a shadow cast over her from behind. Someone was approaching her, and for a moment she suspected it would be Ray. Maybe he quickly went to get something and came back for me. It was sort of rude, and she would have to give him an earful for it, but Alicia was relieved. That meant they could finally hang out. However, the moment she turned back and looked at the person who approached her, she could see it wasn't the boy she was hoping for. She recognized the face, but that didn't mean she was happy to see it. It's him. Alicia tried to hide her disappointment that it wasn't Ray, but she wasn't a great actress. Hey. Billy. I thought you already went off with your friends. Alicia hoped he would take the hint that he could just go and hang out with the many friends he already had. She just didn't feel comfortable under his gaze. Well. I just thought maybe we could hang out together. You know, since it's our first time in town and all. Alicia wanted to leak out a tear. Why were the words that she wanted Ray to say being spoken to her by Billy? It was a tragedy beyond compare. I was hoping to explore on my own. You know how I am. Haha. Alicia didn't want to be rude to Billy, but she felt like she had given him enough hints to back off. I just want to be alone. She smiled, trying very hard to break the tension. However, because Ray isn't here, right? Billy's whisper suddenly greeted her ears. What was that? Ray isn't even here. He went off on his own. He clearly doesn't care about you. Not like I do. Alicia was stunned that Billy would make such an outright confession after he had been so subtle and indirect in the past. Especially now that they were in the middle of the town square. "Billy, lower your voice and... You think I don't have eyes? I see you with him all the time. How can you be going to his room so frequently? Even spending so long there up till late at night?" Alicia knew what Billy was referring to, and it proved her point that he had been indeed stalking her. In retrospect, Alicia realized she had spent way too much time in Ray's room that night. They had both lost track of time due to the fun conversations they were having. Would she change that if she could? Alicia's answer was no. It was clearly because they were having fun that they had taken so much time without either of them realizing it. And it's not like we did anything. But those thoughts aside, Billy was really getting on her nerves. "I told you to lower your... Do you know what people are saying? Do you know how hard I try to fight the rumors and help you out, even in secret? Yet you spend time with that loser that abandons you the slightest chance he gets." Right now, Billy was whining and shouting like a bratty child. Alicia couldn't help but crease her brows in disgust as she looked at him. He kept blabbering on and on about what he had done for her, how hard he was working, and how unfair she was being to him. Read the latest stories en novel.com. It got to a point where Alicia couldn't take his pathetic display any longer. This idiot. There are eyes on us. And he won't stop talking. It was at this point that Alicia reached the limits of her patience, and it was for that very reason that she finally spewed out her undiluted thoughts. "Would you shut up already? You're the most insensitive asshole I've ever spoken to. Why don't you just leave me alone?" The moment she said this, Billy paused in downright shock. It suddenly felt like she was the bad guy. Alicia didn't care, though. She was done being polite to this guy. "The reason I was subtle and indirect to him was because he was also subtle. I didn't want to be too forward, and I considered his feelings, which is why I didn't outrightly reject him. But now that Billy had revealed himself as the creep that he was, Alicia had no reason to keep the farce going. "I don't like you, Billy. And if you keep pestering me, I'll have to personally defend myself." "You wouldn't want a fight between the two of us, would you?" Alicia threatened, deepening her glare. At that moment, Billy shuddered. Everyone knew that Alicia was much stronger and skilled than Billy. Her skills were much better than his, though their classes were in the same tier. If they were ever to fight, it would be an embarrassingly easy win for Alicia. "Exactly. So back off. If you keep pestering me, I might have to tell Adonis and the higher UPS too." The look on Billy's face as she said this made it clear he was nervous. Of course, someone like him wouldn't want to lose all the goodwill he had been getting thus far. Alicia found it to be even more pathetic. "Unlike you, Ray doesn't care about any of that. And yes, he did abandon her in this town to wander on her own, but at least he didn't embarrass her out in the open and bombard her with so many terrible words that Billy used. Last but not least, Alicia actually liked Ray. Not this guy in front of her. "Just leave me alone and don't bother me again, okay? Don't follow me." Alicia walked away, leaving Billy standing like a lifeless statue. She didn't feel particularly good about her actions, but it had to be said. "Look what you've caused, Ray. Because you left, this guy went and reared his big head. Alicia found herself smiling. She wasn't particularly mad at Ray, just a tad disappointed. I wonder what he's up to. I just... Billy was mumbling to himself as he stood at the town square. He remembered how his friends had wanted him to come hang out with them, but he chose to come for Alicia instead. He recollected how happy he was that Ray wasn't present, and Alicia appeared lonely. He actually thought she would be happy to have him as company. Well, he was wrong. Not only did Alicia thoroughly reject him, but she did so in the most humiliating way possible. Billy was heartbroken to the core, and his hollow facade was enough evidence for it. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Man. I honestly feel bad for the Giga Chad, Billy. After everything he's done. Tisk tisk. Alicia really is ungrateful. Chapter 88, A Dark Proposal. Oi. Billy thought he heard a sound behind him, but the sound of his heart shattering was loud enough to drown all external noise. Hey, big man. Billy jerked forward as a hand slapped his back and a friendly smile greeted him. He found a stranger looking at him with a casual expression. The stranger had a black eye patch on one eye, with long black hair flowing down his shoulders. He had strands of beards protruding from his chin, and he was outfitted in a high-quality black robe. Billy had initially wanted to smack the man for hitting him so suddenly, but he chose not to after contemplating a little. I wouldn't want to accidentally kill him. His thoughts trailed. The man had a stupid grin on his face which made Billy angrier. He didn't realize when he was frowning at the total stranger. What do you want? He asked in mild annoyance. If this guy was here to comfort him, then Billy could already see himself clenching just and getting ready for what would come next. Hey. Hey man, relax. I saw everything that happened, and you know what? Billy was ready to throw his punch the moment he heard anything unnecessary. It was bad enough that Alicia had disgraced him in public, but now he was about to be pitted by an absolute stranger like this. It was unacceptable. I think that lady is just confused. Huh? Billy's brows shot up in surprise. He had expected many words from the man, but nothing like what he just heard. Confused. Yes, my guy. Girls are like that when they're that age. My daughters were also the same way. Billy found his brows raised even further. He was still confused, but more than that, he found himself resonating with the stranger. What she needs is something to prompt her certainty. If you're up for it, I have just the thing. Billy felt his heart racing as he stared at the grinning eye patch man. Something about the whole thing felt sketchy, but he couldn't resist the allure. Especially if it meant Alicia would be his. What do you have in mind? Let's not discuss here. It's a very important matter to talk about, so why don't we come to my office? Billy felt a bit skeptical about following a stranger anywhere, but since he was all alone and he had to spend the next 2 hours with something, he decided that he might as well hear the man out. If it's a waste of time, I can just leave. And if the stranger ended up being some shady individual, he could just easily defeat him. I'm among the strongest in this world, after all. After training for this long, Billy was confident in his strength. No random stranger could get the jump on him. I can see your skeptical look, young man. But don't worry. Once I'm done, you'll see it's an offer you can't resist. Billy squinted his eyes as his heart raced in further curiosity. All right. Take me to your office. Billy's eyes were wide open as he looked at the man opposite him. He had just heard the unbelievable, and he was still recoiling in shock as he sat on a very comfortable sofa in the vast room. First and foremost, this stranger's name was Evals Redart, and his office was quite a fanciful place. It was well decorated and very spacious. There was a chair and desk close to the very vast window, and a pair of couches opposite each other, with an exquisite table at the center. The ambience of the room was lovely, thanks to the lights that radiated within it, and the chandelier that hung in the ceiling was pretty fancy as well. It's nothing compared to the royal estate, but this place looks really nice. Billy had known he was a man of means when he saw his clothes, but he didn't think it was to this extent. Despite the surprising display of wealth, however, what stunned Billy most was the man's proposal. That is a little. Yeah. Unethical. Right. The man's smile widened as Billy nodded. Well, it's up to you, big man. If you want some things in life, you have to get your hands dirty. You feel me? Billy clenched his fist as he contemplated all that the man had just said. He had never tried something like that in his life. It won't work. You wouldn't even be able to restrain her. That's where you come in. Just give her this. Evals Redart placed a potion on the table that separated the two of them. As he pushed the bottle towards Billy, the pinkish-red liquid inside sloshed around. And she'll be susceptible to the plan. She won't resist in the slightest. Alicia would never trust me enough to drink that. Billy protested. Then place it inside her food or drink or something. Well. That is. Billy knew Alicia was confused about what she wanted, but he also knew that she currently didn't want to have anything to do with him. There was no way he would have access to her now. The generous Evals brought out something else. It was a special ring, with numerous writings carved on its black iron surface. It had a gleaming red gem affixed at the top, and something about the ring radiated something forbidden. Use this enchanted item. I told you she won't accept anything for. No, you won't give her. You will wear it. It'll allow you to alter your appearance. This was the ring of deceit. It allowed the user to take on the form of the one whom their target trusted most. All you need to do is place the ring's gem on Alicia's skin, and you'll be able to turn into the person she trusts most around her. Once that was done, Billy could then coax her into drinking the red potion. It was the perfect plan. I see. Billy gulped down saliva as he considered the plan, as well as the choices that stood before him. Explore new ovals on novel.com. If I do this, am I really guaranteed to win her love and affection? Sure, the plan was a cliché winner. If he pulled it off well, he would be able to get under Alicia's good graces. Billy just wondered if there was something safer. Something easier. What about something like a love potion? Don't you have that? Billy had a gold coin in his pocket. If something like that existed, he wouldn't hesitate to buy it. If it's more expensive, I'll find a way to gather the money somehow. He could even flash his royal badge to show he was trustworthy. Right now, Billy was just desperate. Worthwhile things never come easy, my man. Love potions are only temporary. If you want something with a more permanent effect, this is your best shot. As he heard those words, Billy felt like he was confronted with a choice. I don't want to lose Alicia. I don't want to lose to Ray. He clenched his teeth as he looked at the red potion and gleaming ring. They beckoned to him. So. What will it be, lover boy? I. Billy stuttered as he considered all his options. Right here and now, he had to make his choice. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. What choice do you think he'll make? It didn't take Ray very long to reach the doorstep of the Royal Dungeons compound. He could see the tall buildings of the refineries and processing centers. He imagined that most of these buildings had been rendered useless due to an absence of enough raw materials to process, but he didn't allow that to distract him. The nation's impoverished state will soon improve once we start exploring the dungeon. Right now, he just had to make sure he got a slice of the wealth before it was taken from him. It's been about 2 hours since Brutus and Lucielle left the royal estate to come here. I better hurry. Ray already knew that it was impossible for them to clear such a large supply of monster core within such a limited time, so there was no need to panic too much. However, he couldn't help the bad feeling he was getting. It felt like if he didn't hurry, he would lose everything he had worked for. All right, then. As he slowly descended from his elevated height, he decided to go with the classic trick with the guards. They were all stationary and observant, but compared to his current state, they could pretty much have been sitting ducks. The only ones he had to be worried about were Lucielle and Brutus, and those two were probably still in the dungeon at this point. I'll make this quick. Ray licked his lips and concentrated his energy. Before he could complete the activation of his skill, the doors began to open from within, and two figures abruptly came out. What? The duo was none other than Lucielle and Brutus, and they had disturbed expressions on their faces. They're done already? He was genuinely surprised, and for good reason. Once they noticed the 6th level had been subjugated, they would have gone to the 7th and met the hobgoblins. He doubted they wouldn't be surprised about the hobgoblin civilization. They were sure to explore more, and it was inevitable that they would find a stash of monster cores. That was how Ray had expected the whole thing to turn out. I can't believe they're done with all that already. I knew they'd be fast, but not this fast. Ray wondered if he had underestimated the capabilities of the head warrior and grand mage. However, almost as soon as he thought that, a question flashed in his mind. Something is off, though. Why do they look so disturbed? The looks on both their faces were awful, almost as if they were too distraught for words. I mean, shouldn't it be the opposite? They should be rejoicing that they found so much treasure. The 6th floor had been cleared by him, but the minerals there were still going to be incredibly useful to the nation. Especially the magic crystals. Then there's the orichalcum on the 6th floor, and the monster cores. Ray didn't know if they had made it to the 7th floor, but if they did, they would have seen even more goodies. All for free. I mean, sure, they'd be disappointed that we won't be able to train with the fodder of those floors, but I'm sure they'd be more overjoyed about what they found. Besides, since Lucielle and Brutus were so capable, Ray didn't have any doubts that they could lead him and his classmates to the lower floors without much trouble. Yet, what was with this look? Something is definitely wrong. As Brutus and Lucielle slowly departed from the gates, Ray decided to abandon his initial plan and instead follow the two. That was when he heard it. This is serious. I can't believe all those floors were conquered. Ray realized they probably figured out someone did it. However, since evidence didn't point towards him, he knew he was safe. It looks like the makings of a powerful monster. Nothing else explains it. Ray smiled to himself as Luciel sang his praises. Of course, not the monster part. He was by no means a monster of any kind. Ray was simply happy that he was recognized as someone powerful by the nation's strongest. Hobgoblins and darkwolves are certainly not the strongest, but the way they were brutally slaughtered can only be the work of a very merciless beast. It was at this point that Ray realized that something was amiss in their discussion. What hobgoblins? What night wolves? Ray was currently a bird, and his senses were all heightened thanks to a skill, so he was sure they hadn't detected him and he heard them clearly. What did they just say? And even the strange ape-like creatures. Their mutilated corpses were just the burn scars and claw marks. Their monster cores and teeth were removed too. It's clearly an intelligent monster. Ray knew he was responsible for sending the hobs to harvest the monster cores of the monkey monsters, but he didn't resort to burns or claws when defeating them. And he certainly knew the hobgoblins wouldn't do that either. And the teeth? I didn't take those as well. Now that Ray thought about it, the teeth of those monsters had to be valuable due to how tough they were, but he hadn't recognized that when he subjugated them. The hobgoblins won't do anything I didn't instruct them to. And even on the off chance that they were the ones responsible for that, who was the one that killed them then? The more Ray thought about what he was hearing, the more absurd it sounded. And to think the floors were barren. We couldn't even find a single resource for use. Ray's eyes bulged the moment he heard Luciel say the unthinkable. No. No way. Not only did they not find the magic crystals on the 6th and 8th floor, but they also didn't see any orichalcum in the 7th floor. These were the resources that Ray intentionally didn't plunder so as to enrich the United Human Alliance. And now they were gone. That wasn't the worst part, though. If they were able to explore up to the 8th floor, that means they had to have seen the place where all those monster cores were kept. The fact that he had mentioned finding nothing meant only one thing to Ray. Everything. It's all gone. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Looks like things aren't just going the way of our MC. Chapter 90 Back to the Black Market. What the fuck? Ray felt his heart thumping as he heard the muffled conversation between Luciel and Brutus. He didn't want to believe what they were saying. But Ray knew how foolish and irrational that would be. They're talking amongst themselves, so they're most likely telling the truth. Ray felt like he had to check for himself, but he felt a wave of hesitation hit him. There's a lot going on here that I don't understand. I don't know anymore. As he stared at the royal dungeon entrance, he felt a sigh escape his beaks. What the hell? All that effort? For nothing. He felt shitty, to say the least. It could be an intelligent monster that did this, but why do I find this hard to believe? To Ray, this felt like the work of a person. And there was no one else that crossed his kind but the mastermind that set him up a few days ago. Who else would be behind this? They clearly know of my escapades, so it wouldn't be surprising that they know of the royal dungeon. But if that was the case, it meant the male factor knew Ray's full capabilities, or there was a high chance that they did. That possibility was unsettling. They know who I am and what I can do, but I don't know who they are. It was frightening. Ray had never felt this powerless since he arrived in this world, and it didn't matter the skills he had at his disposal at this point. He was still very vulnerable. I might have to leave the royal estate. I don't know if it's safe. But once he had this thought, Ray thought about everyone and everything he would be leaving behind. They weren't much, but they mattered to him. No. I can't risk it. However, they didn't matter as much as his safety. I can't deal with this guy right now. I have to grow stronger and smarter. Ray had been pushed to a corner, and he could feel his thoughts in shambles. If it's him that took all those monster cores and resources, then there's a chance he also knows about my deal with the Carrie Blanc group. It was possible that this male factor would one-up him by making a deal with the company, rendering his own agreement with them obsolete. They have more to gain by following the mastermind, whoever they are. Ray would have bitten his lips if he had any. He could feel frustration within him rise to an unexpected degree. This is unpleasant. However, despite all of these thoughts and worries, Ray considered the possibility that he could be wrong. Perhaps it wasn't the mastermind. Maybe it was some other party. Maybe it was even a monster. Either way, I don't think the royal dungeon is where I should be right now. Ray had to prepare for the worst-case scenario. With so many monster cores gone, there's a high chance that the market will be saturated by a lot of them. Ray still had a considerable amount with him, so he knew it would be wise to get rid of them as soon as possible, before they lost their value. And so, as he watched Luciel and Brutus prepare fly in the air thanks to the former's wind magic, Ray flapped his wings and went his way. I better hurry. The black market was the same as usual, sketchy places, and legitimate areas that seemed as mainstream as a market could get. Ray was currently donning his disguise, and he had taken the form of a more mature individual so as to hide his identity. His orichalcum mask was going to distort the prying gazes of detection magic, but he knew that high-level ones could probably get past its effects. Thus, the need to have a different face under his mask. Other than that, though, Ray had to look imposing, so he adored this persona to suit those purposes. His skull mask, his dark cloak, and the aura of danger he exuded, made the lowlives avoid him, and the strong recognize him. Noah should be just about done with business. I might even bump into him. As Ray was having this thought, he noticed a masked individual walk past him. This masked person had golden hair, and the air he exuded was of dignity not befitting a place like the black market. Ray couldn't keep his eyes away from the young man who kept walking without paying him any kind. Somehow, he felt familiar. Why does that guy remind me of Adonis? It can't be him. Someone like Adonis wouldn't be caught dead in the black market. The matter was on Ray's mind for a few seconds, but once his eyes spotted the building that was his destination, it was soon forgotten. Instead, the thought of business quickly overwhelmed him. I have to get these monster cores sold no matter what. Even if they're at a discount. An overwhelming amount of monster cores were about to flood the market. Ray knew that if he didn't make haste, his entire business plans would crumble before his very eyes. It's a bit early, but I have no other choice. Ray was welcomed gracefully into the Carrie Blanc building. He was shown the path upstairs and even escorted by an esteemed individual like the VIP that he was. Your subordinate is still discussing with Sir Aldred Winsley. Would you like to join them? He had been asked. Ray was surprised that Noah hadn't left the building yet, but with what was on his mind, he considered it to be a trivial issue. Yes, I would. He had responded. He was then taken to the front of the room that Noah and Aldred occupied. It seemed a more fanciful place than the one he remembered using. I guess they want to treat us better as exclusive sellers. Ray managed to crack a smile as he opened the knob and entered the room. Let's just hope I can maintain that status. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Sorry the chapter is a little shorter than usual. I appreciate the support and comments, everyone. The golden tickets and gifts too. They all go a long way. Y'all are the best. Chapter 91 Surprise from Aldred. Sir. It's such a pleasant surprise to see you. Ray was almost instantly greeted by a very excited Aldred Winsley. Get the L-Testvels on Nov/Elbin/OM. The man was grinning sheepishly at him, almost the way a fan would react when meeting their favorite celebrity for the first time. He's literally gushing, was Ray's impression as he nodded slightly, entering the room. I was just asking your subordinate here when next we can see you. Ray glanced at Noah and noticed him giving an uncomfortable smile. Were they pressuring him to convince me to come? Is that why he took so long? It was just a guess, so Ray dismissed it. In any case, it really is good to have you here. We have a lot to discuss. Ray sat on the sofa, and Noah went and stood behind him almost instantly. Good. He knows how to keep appearances without me needing to tell him. Ray's thoughts trailed on relief. Noah seemed to be able to handle himself in business now, but sometimes he was still an indecisive klutz. Like just now, when he allowed his time to be delayed because of Aldred Winsley. His discomfort was hidden behind a smile, but Ray just ignored it. These sorts of things were best experienced for one to learn from it. But this is going better than I thought. It seems like they haven't caught wind of the incoming saturation. Ray was relieved, to say the least. This meant he had a shot here to sell and be done away with what would soon become useless rocks given enough time. Before we get straight into business, I believe there is someone you should meet. After Aldred said this with a smile, he raised his hand and spoke to a bracelet on his wrist. Bring him in. His voice echoed. Who? I wonder what this is all about. Ret didn't need to wonder too long, because a knock promptly echoed and the door soon opened before he was done making guesses. Then. We have brought him, sir. Ray's eyes darted at the door and he saw two hefty-looking men standing behind someone who looked absolutely miserable. The man in front of them was tied up. And he had rags for clothes. Bruises covered his face, and he had an expression that showed he was desperately begging for mercy. He couldn't speak, though, as his mouth was covered in a very thick gag. His eyes, however, said all that needed to be said. What the hell? Who is that guy? Ray wondered in shock. He caught Noah fidgeting from the side of his eye, which meant that perhaps it was someone he recognized. See, could it be? Ray's eyes widened under the mask as the two men dragged the miserable man into the room. We managed to track down and capture the man who claimed to be our affiliate. A lowlife like this, using our name to scam one of your esteemed subordinates. That strikes me as unjust. Ray found himself nodding despite the state of shock he was in. And so, we decided to punish him for his acts. Of course, he regrets his actions and would like to say a few things to you. Alder then proceeded to look at one of the hefty men and nodded while saying, "Untie him." The constraints that bound the man were removed, and the gag was also done away with. Once this was done, Ray was greeted with the desperate prostration of the badly wounded man. I am sorry. So sorry. Sorry for my actions. Won't do it again. Please. Have mercy. Why? It seemed like the man's teeth had been broken, and his swollen lips got in the way of his words. This is brutal. Ray watched as the man repeatedly apologized for his actions and hit his head on the ground while begging to be forgiven. I feel bad for him. I even got my money back, so there's no need to be this extreme. However, this was the black market. He couldn't say something like this here to these criminals and brutes. You didn't have to go out of your way. Ray responded, turning to Alderd. Nonsense. This is the least we could do for your continued business with us. Alderd was smiling the same way any bootlicker would. I've spent enough time with Billy in the past to know what ass-kissing looks like. Alderd Winsley wanted something from Ray, which was why he and his group went ahead and did this. Do I really strike them as someone who would enjoy this? Goddamn. Ray was both impressed and worried about this. At least, now I know that this persona works well in the black market. His black skull mask was crudely made, so he was thinking of getting something new, but with this entire thing, he knew he had to keep it somewhere. Just in case. Well, it's fine. It seems he has learned his lesson, so he's free to go. We have more important things to consider anyway. As he was dragged off, the pitiful man thanked Ray with his broken teeth exposed and his bulging eyes nearly popping out of his sockets. Now I feel like a criminal overlord or something. How did things end up this way? He nearly sighed to himself. Still, he Ray himself for the conversation about to go down. All right. What do you want? He went straight to the point. It was better if he took the initiative and had the lead in this conversation. Oh ho. It seems you figured it out, sir. You wouldn't have done something as unnecessary as that without an intention. So, I ask you again. What do you want? Ray felt it was a bit insensitive, if not downright rude, to refer to what they did to that man in such a light manner. But he already knew how the game had to be played. He wasn't about to slack off. Indeed. The thing is, sir, we are in need of those monster cores you provide. Alderd began with an honest position. He had a gentle smile, one so genuine you wouldn't believe he ordered that a man should be beaten so badly. He leaned closer to Ray and had that look of excitement still radiating all over his face. I see. How many exactly? Ray answered, his tone calm and unchanging. However, something entirely different was going on within his thoughts. Yes. Perfect. The worst-case scenario has been avoided. He had to hide his excitement very well, and he felt like his mask really helped with that. I just hope they need as much as I have. It would be suspicious if I try to sell them more than what they are asking for. That would ruin the value of his goods, per the law of demand and supply. But right now I'm desperate. I don't mind selling it at a slightly lower price if as much as you have. Alderd's loud voice interrupted Ray's intense thoughts. It was so surprising that he was taken aback by the broker's words. As if Ray didn't hear it the first time, Alderd repeated his words with far more fervor. We are willing to buy everything you have. Asterisk. 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 Some good news at least. I wonder what they need so many monster cores for, though. Chapter 92 The Cores to Sell. How will this go? Alderd tightened his fingers that were wrapped around one another as he made a resolute stare at the man before him. Despite his confident demeanor, he was quite nervous. He hasn't shown up to sell to us in a few days, so the expansion plan has been compromised because of him. There was a chance that the man before then had broken the exclusive contract and sold to another party, but Alderd didn't want to think that. He just didn't seem like that kind of guy. But, even if he did break their agreement, what was he supposed to do? He had an S-tier skill. Father warned me not to make him our enemy no matter what. That meant he couldn't even be penalized for breaking the contract. All that the group could do was try to renegotiate and strengthen their bond. We've given him no reason to doubt our sincerity. And while it isn't much, by disciplining that lowlife, I hoped we could show just how useful and committed we are to him. The man's unimpressed tone told Alderd that this move wasn't as effective as he had hoped, but he couldn't give up. For the expansion to other markets, we need a bulk of goods. If possible, the same amount as what he brought last time. No, even double. It actually didn't matter the amount he could provide. The more monster cores he had, the bigger their profit would be. Alderd just hoped their esteemed seller would cooperate with them. In all my years, I've never been pushed to this point. Alderd learned everything he knew from his father, and he had spent his entire life in the Carrie Blanc group. He knew the inner workings of business and he had long mastered the art of negotiation. Bargaining power, equivalent exchange, demand and supply, and various other concepts of business had been ingrained in his brain since he was little. The only reason he was currently operating under his moniker of Alfred Winsley, a mere broker, was simply a final test his father concocted to see if he was ready for the larger business world. Alderd knew he couldn't afford to fail here. Are you sure? You can handle what I possess? The moment he was asked this question, Alderd froze in place. He instantly realized the error he had made. What did I just say? How could I have been so stupid? By saying they would buy all the monster cores in their seller's possession, he had implied that the Carrie Blanc group could afford all of it. For an individual with an S-tier skill, one who had long exceeded the limits of humanity, that would be nothing short of an insult. Alderd knew he had to correct himself. I apologize. What I meant was that we'd buy as much as you're willing to sell. We only hope you can sell as much as possible. It was impossible to decipher the seller's reaction to this since he wore a mask, so Alderd could only hope it was effective while gulping. I see. Very well, then. Alderd beamed a smile as he noticed the man straighten his posture. Thank goodness. He sighed in relief. Looks like we've almost got ourselves a deal. This is crazy. Ray couldn't believe his luck. He had expected to be the one desperate to sell his stuff, but it seemed like he possessed all the bargaining power. It will be foolish of me to keep hoarding my stock now. It was clear that the Carrie Blanc group was in need of monster cores of good quality. It was inevitable that word of this got out, so it would only be a matter of time before the influx of monster cores would come their way. From what Ray could tell, these people had a lot of influence. The fact that they were able to find a random scammer just to please him, and their readiness to buy so many monster cores proved they were very powerful. I can't miss out on this opportunity now. If he hesitated, there was a chance he would suffer a loss unlike any other. Since I've been given the opportunity, I'll sell everything I have. Ray opened his, bringing out a couple of sacks from each box inside. Has been changed to. It was originally the latter, but I think it became the former at a point in the story, but now I'm switching back to. Sorry for the confusion. Of course, they were full to the brim with monster cores. One of these sacks is different. Ray smiled as he opened the small sack more like a pouch, really in front of Alderd, and within it were spatial rings. Thankfully, I was able to get a good amount of spatial rings and implemented a prototype of my grand plan before everything went awry. It was regrettable that he could carry out his full plan to drain the Hobbs of their stash of monster cores, but he at least got somewhere with it. And now, Ray was about to profit from that sliver of quick thinking. Within each of these rings are 3 sacks of monster cores. Ray began. There are 50 rings in this pouch. That was a total of 150 sacks of monster cores. Adding that to the 45 other sacks that were on display, it was a total of 195 sacks. This is what I am willing to sell to you, Mr. Winsley. Ray could see the man before him salivate as his eyes nearly popped out of his eyes. The broker certainly wasn't expecting such an absurd influx of monster cores from Ray. The question is, can you afford it? As Ray's voice echoed in the room, he studied Alderd's overwhelmed expression. He seemed surprised, but not to the point of being unable to pay. Ray couldn't be certain, so he kept his fingers crossed and waited for an answer. Fortunately for him, luck was on his side. Yes. We will buy everything. Asterisk. 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 What an absurd amount of money. Goddamn. This is nearly 4 times what Ray sold the last time. He's gonna have over 5,000 platinum coins. Chapter 93, the VIP section. The deal was sealed after that. Alderd Winsley used an enchanted item to calculate just how many monster cores existed in each sack, and by multiplying them with the agreed upon price, they arrived at the selling price. A whooping 4,650 platinum coin. I still can't believe this. Ray was trying his best to remain composed after hearing such an absurd number, but his heart remained unsteady. Adding that to his balance of 1,051 platinum coins, he now possessed 5,701 platinum coins in total. I never thought I'd get this much in a single go. Talkless of now. Ray felt like a scammer, but he didn't feel the slightest bit bad. Why would he? This was the black market for a reason. Once the influx of monster cores arrive, these guys will be at a loss. I should probably avoid coming here for the time being. Ray smiled internally, realizing he had made enough money for now. Training was what came next, so distractions like this were unnecessary. As always, it is a pleasure doing business with you. Alderd's voice woke him from his deep thoughts. The deal had been completed, but they were both still in the lounge. Staff had come to take away the monster cores, and also give him his money. At this point, Ray felt like he was overstaying his welcome. I should be leaving now. He rose to his feet in a slow, dignified manner. Alderd's gaze was on him the entire time. Likewise. I'm leaving now, he said in a monotone. At this point, Alderd jumped to his feet almost as if he hadn't expected their dear seller to leave so soon. Please, why not stay a bit longer? I would like us to discuss further on. There are other places I must be. Ray didn't want to be among the few who would be late for Adonis' stipulated time. He was already in enough hot water as it was. It'll be bad for my extra image if I keep having attention drawn to me. As a result, he decided to leave as early as he could. Besides, it would really suck if the influx of monster cores happened while he was still in this building. For his own safety, he had to scram. Oh okay, I understand. But before you leave, why not take a look at our newest products? You're our esteemed seller, so it would be our greatest pleasure to show you some of what we have to offer. Ray could already tell that they were baiting him to be a customer of theirs. That way, the relationship could go both ways. Well, there's no harm in seeing what they have, I guess. Frankly speaking, Ray was looking for good equipment. He often heard how enchanted items were lifesavers for adventurers, and that even a weakling could be unbelievably strong with the right items. Right now, even with my many skills, I have limitations. Having enchanted items to complement his current abilities and make up for his weaknesses would serve him best. Fine. Let me see. Alderd seemed extremely pleased to hear that Ray was interested, and he didn't hesitate to show his satisfaction. At this point, Ray felt like the man he had first been introduced to, and the new Alderd he was seeing were two different people. I guess this is what being around stronger and richer people does to you. It reminded him a little of Billy. I can at least respect Alderd for his actions. He's doing it for the sake of profit. Business works like this. As for Billy, his own motives were simply useless. In any case, I'm happy I got to cut away from that guy pretty early. Ray could only imagine if Billy was still his friend, and how he would have been limited in a host of ways as a result. I would have probably told him of my skill, and my desire to go out. And even this whole black market thing, that is, even if I make it this far. The problem with being friends with certain people is that they tend to rub off on you. Billy would most likely disapprove of my behavior and would try to force me into training with him and the big leagues. I'm not sure which I would like best, to be honest. But like this, I have more freedom. He was richer too. Alderd led the masked fellow to their shopping area, the place reserved for only the most esteemed of customers. Even in a high-end store like this, there was no way to escape discrimination in some way. Certain products simply weren't meant for all eyes to see. They were special, meant only for the cream of the crop. The mask seller was brought to the place where those products were kept. Welcome to our VIP area. All items here were made with the highest grade of materials available. There was pride in Alderd's tone as he spoke. No monster core less than grade 7 was used to make any of the items here, and only the most refined of minerals and monocrystals were utilized in the manufacturing process. Not only that, but the goods were one of a kind unless they came in a set. Still, you would never see more than one person carrying an item within this place. A truly luxurious place. Due to your continuous relationship with us, we would like to give you a gift. Alderd began, breaking the silence in the room. This was the true reason he had brought the masked man to their establishment. You may take any one item of your liking. No, make that two. Since your guard there might fancy something too. Alderd could see their seller's subordinate squirm a little. He couldn't help but feel proud of himself for employing that strategy. He often sends this man to do business with us. If we can get him wholly on our side, I'm sure that would work to our benefit. I see. Then I shall take a look around. The deep tone of the masked man curtly interrupted Alderd's thoughts, causing him to straighten up instantly. Why yes. Please do. And so, the seller advanced to the rows of enchanted items, with Alderd standing still and looking at him from his position. Hopefully, with this, we can have his goodwill. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. It seems Ray underestimates how much these people value him. Chapter 94 Getting Freebies. Holy fuck. These items are all crazy. Ray had been to a place that was somewhat of a luxury store, so he had seen the items they had there. That was where he had been able to get all those spatial rings and the current attire he was donning. He had also checked out a few more items through Noah after the sales that he had done for him. However, compared to those, the items he was seeing here were on another level. They made those other items seem like garbage. And what the hell are these prices? In the VIP section of the previous store, the cheapest item there cost a platinum coin. However, here, the cheapest cost 5. I can buy decent land for that much, can't I? It seemed like, in this world, buying power was more expensive than buying property. When Ray thought of it, it all made sense. Of what use was getting a property you wouldn't be able to properly protect? The owner of land could be maimed and robbed, stripped of everything they possessed. But the ones with power? How could they be victims of such cruelty? No. They were the ones who would maim and rob. They were the ones who would strip others of all they possessed. In essence, having power was far more beneficial than possessing mundane things like property. With enough power, you can even defy established governments and carve your own path. With the threat of dragons looming, this only made the need for power skyrocket. Ray understood all of this, so after his initial shock, he calmed himself down. Besides, the effects look nice. They're worth it. Every item had a price tag on it, and a plaque underneath that showed the abilities they had. As a result, Ray could tell what an enchanted item could do from a single glance. This one can actually increase magic spells by 100%. That's insane. It literally meant double the firepower. Unfortunately, it only works for spells in the average to low tiers, so it's useless to me. Besides, Ray had buff skills that could do even better, so while he was impressed, he wasn't willing to purchase it. I can see how a weakling could get twice as powerful just from that item, though. He smirked. Ray averted his gaze to Noah, who was just standing still the whole time. He had forgotten about him since he was so invested in the items. You heard Mr. Winsley. Get over here and choose an item for yourself. Noah's next reaction proved that the boy had been waiting for Ray to say the words. He jumped from his position and excitedly rushed to the rows of shelves that pristinely displayed their merchandise. All these items are great and all. It's hard to pick one. Reyes began to wonder if he should just get one gift, try it out, and then come back to buy a set of them using his discount privilege. Or should I just get the whole set of stuff I wanna buy now? Knowing that there was a high chance that he might burn his bridges with the Carrie Blanc group, wasn't it best to milk as much from this entire relationship as possible? But what if I don't end up burning my bridges? What if the oversaturation never happened? Right now, it was just a theory in Rey's head, so there was a chance that he could be wrong about it. If that was the case, getting all the items I want now will make me seem too eager. As if I haven't seen these kinds of things before. It would ruin his image. Besides, since Alderd Winsley wants to give me a gift, if I take a lot of items, he might feel obligated to give me everything for free. Rey didn't particularly mind that, but he knew it wasn't good for business. I can't let them think I'm taking advantage of them. We just both have to feel like we're mutually benefiting. There was a thin line between interest and greed. Rey didn't want to be the first one to display the latter, though he knew it was inevitable that the Carrie Blanc group would show it. That won't happen anytime soon, though. I should try to be as careful as possible here. As a result, Rey decided to pick just one item. As he made his decision, his eyes spotted a sparkling ring on the shelf adjacent to where he stood. AHH. So these are the items you've chosen. In Noah's hand was a blade barely 3 inches long. It looked like a real sword, though styled like a Japanese katana. It had 3 effects. One was the ability to grow in size within a single second, turning into a life-size blade. The second was the ability to turn invisible. In essence, this blade could switch between visibility and the opposite, even in its full length. That was an extremely useful ability for a weapon to have. Lastly, it always returned to the user after a set period, or the user could always reach for it, and like a magnet, it would be pulled towards them. Such a cool weapon. Rey eyed the blade with envy. He wondered why he never saw this item when exploring. Well, there are other items and weapons with similar abilities, so it's all good. Rey considered getting one for himself, but when he thought of it, he didn't really see the need to. He had skills that could replicate every effect that Noah's blade could do. But, well, Noah's blade doesn't cost mana to use its functions. Even its invisibility didn't cost a single strand of Noah's energy. Well, it has mana crystals embedded within it, so it most definitely uses its own mana supply. That, of course, meant that it couldn't stay invisible forever. There would be a duration period and cooldown state. The mana in it should recover over time, so it's not a one-time consumable. That's good. Noah had gone to choose a great item. Rey felt proud of him. Almost like a big brother would when their younger one told them they finally got a girlfriend. Rey nodded behind his mask in support. The young shall grow. Asterisk. 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 What item do you think Rey got? Hope you're not too disappointed when you find out. Chapter 95, A Gift for Another. Sir Seller. Are you sure this is the item you desire? There are better items we have to offer, and I'm not sure this suits you. Style. As Alderd said this, Rey took one more look at the item that was resting on his palm. The enchanted item that Rey got was a ring. It had a pure white surface, with an amber crystal affixed at the top. The amber gleam it had reminded him of Alicia, which was when he remembered a big blunder he made. I totally forgot about her. They had both exchanged glances and smiles numerous times that morning, so perhaps she was expecting them to hang out. My mind was so swamped that I didn't even remember her. Ray had thought in a panic. That was when he decided to make the most irrational but emotionally satisfying choice. It's not. For me. Ray answered Aldred with a fleeting tone. He could already see Noah grinning from behind his hooded disguise, and he felt like punching his teeth out. So what if I got it for Alicia? It's normal for friends to get each other stuff. The ring was extremely beautiful. The craftsmanship on its white surface felt surreal, and the gem looked very pretty. Like her eyes. Many would fault him for making such a foolish choice, but he simply felt it was the right thing to do. I can just come back to get my items. But, I feel this would really suit her. The white amber, as the ring was called, had two major functions. The first, and major ability, that it had was that it had imbued to itself. As long as the item was on, the wielder would constantly get healed if they sustained any damage. Of course, this effect could be turned off, but it was a safe bet against surprise attacks and helpless situations. Alicia has a healing skill, but it consumes a lot of mana. With the white amber, she should be a lot safer. Then, there was the second function. Can boost the physical abilities of its user for a limited time, and can only be used once a day. It had the perfect effect for Alicia, who was a tamer, and had weaker physical stats compared to her other qualities. Ray had given this a lot more thought than simply its aesthetic. I see. It was my mistake to overlook the possibility of you having a significant other. Well, I absolutely understand. Aldred smiled in a knowing manner. The kind of expression guys gave their fellow guys when it came to girls. For a moment there, Ray felt like the two of them had become brothers. It's not like that. Ray clarified, once again feeling Noah's smile pierce him from behind. Something told him the boy was stifling a chuckle. I totally understand. She's very lucky to have someone like you who considers her safety. Ray couldn't disagree with Aldred on that. By the way, Sir Seller. Even with our solid business relationship, it hurts me that I have to address you in such a way. Once Aldred said this, Ray's lips began to part. So that was his goal all along. To get close enough to me so I can tell him my name. You initially introduced yourself as Yer, but I have to assume that it is a code name. That is correct. Then, I would like to know what to address you as. This approach made Ray's grin widen even more. Of course, he wasn't stupid enough to give Aldred his real name, though he doubted Aldred would know of his identity from just that. Even if they were to meet later in the future, and someone called him Ray in front of Aldred, he doubted the man would pay him a second glance once he saw how mundane he looked. Aldred already had an image of Ray in his mind. There was no way. No way in hell that he would ever suspect that he was actually the mask seller if they met in real life. Still, I don't feel comfortable sharing my real name. Call me Relix. Ray spat out, generating the quickest name he could. It was just his surname backwards. AHH. Sir Relix. Understood. For a second, both stared at each other in silence. Then. Well, I will personally package both items for you, Sir Relix. It won't take long at all. Ray and Noah nodded silently and waited to get the items they didn't have to pay for. I hope she likes it. Ray and Noah walked down the street of the open-air market together, seeing chatters among buyers and sellers. The ambience of the public marketplace seemed to mostly consist of noise and the constant smell of spices. Ray could see people haggling for their goods, and he observed some commotion in other areas. They'd never try something like this in a luxury store. He found himself thinking. After receiving the VIP treatment a couple of times, he couldn't see himself haggling like this. And then, there's the unpleasant side of this place. Ray could see beggars all around the marketplace. Kids, adults, poverty did not discriminate here. It reminded him of his own world. I guess even fantasy worlds have stuff like this too. It was heartbreaking to see the dirty beggars, with their desperate eyes and scrawny bodies, seek our scraps. They made sure to stay in the shadows, considering the capital's policies on vagrants and beggars. Life is harsh wherever you go. Ray sighed, deciding to ignore them. He indeed had enough money to make all of them set for life, but Ray knew he would never dispense a single coin for these strangers. It was a bit funny, though tragic. All these people needed to survive in a day were a couple of bronze coins. A single bronze coin could fill the belly of a beggar. Yet I just got items worth millions of those in a single hour. So, how exactly are you going to give her? Have you thought of it yet? Noah's voice interrupted Ray's thoughts, causing him to look at the boy in puzzlement. He knew Noah had also noticed the beggars, but the fact that he chose to bring up this topic showed that he had noticed Ray's discomfort with the whole thing. He's trying to change topics for my sake? How cute. Ray couldn't help but grin. I don't understand what you mean. I'll just give it to her. Normally. I responded with a slight shrug. And how will you explain where you saw the ring? It looks very expensive, you know. Too expensive for the gold coin we were given. Noah made a valid point, but it wasn't like Ray hadn't thought of that. I don't need to overcomplicate it. Ray smiled as he told Noah of his grand plan, that he won it in a game where he had to stake some money. In essence, gambling. Read the latest stories en Noble.com. And I'll tell her that I got it practically for free, compared to its value. People would assume that he meant that exchanging a single gold coin for something like this was what he meant, not knowing he meant it literally. I'll also tell her not to tell anyone it's from me. But, even if she does, and I am placed before a truth seeker, all I have to do is be honest. Noah raised his brow as Ray said this. I'll tell them that I won it in a game and got it practically for free. Noah didn't seem to understand how Ray could equate what had just happened to the lie he had concocted. However, in response to his skepticism, Ray only broadened his smile. In the end, isn't business just another game? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I ended up spending more time than I expected on this tangent. We'll soon be getting back to the main story, so don't worry. Chapter 96 The Rendezvous. Profit and loss. Buying and selling. Stakes and rewards. Business was simply a complicated game where the players were the buyers and sellers. In the end, both sides wanted to win, and it was often the case that only one party became ultimately victorious. The seller would desire to sell at the highest price possible, while the buyer desired to get the product or service at the cheapest rate available. In the end, the one with the lesser bargaining power or skill ended up losing and compromising their positions. That was how Ray saw it. It's not technically a lie. He smiled at Noah, who didn't wholly understand his thought process. Don't worry. I doubt it'll get to that level. The United Human Alliance was in a precarious state. Ray doubted they would have the luxury of worrying about where Ray got a single enchanted item. I even asked Alderd, and unless the item is appraised, there's no way of telling what it really does. Why would the United Human Alliance go to all the trouble of yanking off and appraising the property of one of their strongest assets? It was never going to happen. It's a relief we're able to use enchanted items now, though. Ray wondered what his classmates had gotten with their gold coin. I doubt they'd spend it wisely. I was right. As Ray joined the gathering students at the agreed-upon rendezvous point, he could see the junks they were proudly holding in their hands. From the words he could make out from all their chattering, he realized that those were the things they got with their gold coins. Bunch of idiots. Ray was certain that if his classmates had taken their time to study the economics of H-Tray, or at least that of the United Human Alliance capital, they would not have made such poor financial decisions. They don't understand the value of a gold coin. Look at how they're all treating it as if it's a silver coin. Ray could imagine the grinning faces of merchants who had taken advantage of his classmates. He was very sure they had just popped up in stalls and asked, "Hey, what can I get with this gold coin?" As a result, they got ripped off. And the worst part? I can't believe things are so cheap here. I got so much just from a single coin. I ate till my belly was full. I got a lot of dresses. All the students were so impressed with what they had gotten that they felt it was too much. You can get your belly full with less than a silver coin, idiot. Ray wanted to yell out, but he maintained his manners. Sure, high-end restaurants were way more expensive than regular kinds. But, from what he was hearing his classmates say, they didn't go to such places. At some point, he grew exasperated with hearing their adventures that he shut his ears off from their noise and focused on his thoughts. I wonder what Adonis bought. The blond boy at the center of the group didn't seem to have anything in particular, so it got Ray curious. He really resembles that stranger I saw back then, though. Ray tried to picture Adonis with a mask, and it fit perfectly. He had heard stories of people who had met someone who looked exactly like them or who resembled them to a fault, so it wasn't all too strange to him. I guess doppelgangers and lookalikes exist in this world too. Hey, Ray. A feminine voice startled Ray, causing to nearly jump in surprise. He had been so focused on Adonis, blocking everything out, that he didn't sense the one who was right behind him. He glanced behind him and saw Trisha standing there. You startled me, Trisha. He rubbed his head as he laughed nervously. What does she want with me? And to slap his face and say, but he controlled himself. It wasn't their fault that they weren't financially literate in this new world. Oh wait. It is. Trisha's confident smile, and her very seductive body already put Ray on edge. He fought to maintain a balance between his teenage hormones and his rational mind. She's wearing a tank top and very tight jeans today. His eyes did their best not to be too noticeable. He had often wondered why Trisha liked wearing stuff like this, but after hearing her talk to one of her new friends about it, he finally got his answer. It's apparently easier for her to move in, since to her it feels like she's naked. To Ray that wasn't any better. Sure, training for her was pleasant since she had no extraneous material hindering her movements and fluidity, but Ray considered the greater implications. That means she currently feels like she's naked right now. Every time she walked or trained. In her mind she was. Stop thinking about that, Ray. Oh? What's that poking out in your trousers, Ray? The moment Ray heard Trisha say this, he panicked and placed both hands around his crotch. To his surprise, though, he was pretty flaccid. Haha. I was just messing with you. Red hues stained his face as he looked at the tomboyish girl. He had never been so humiliated in all his life. He remembered how Alderd treated him with so much respect, and imagined what the same man would say if he saw him now. It was not a pretty picture. She probably saw me ogling her. But was I really? Ray didn't know anymore. He only knew how pathetic he felt. Anyway, what do you think? Trisha flashed out a blade seemingly out of nowhere. It was a long sword, and there was a sort of black glow about it as it gleamed in the sunlight. She tightly gripped the hilt and her proud expression said plenty about the blade she currently wielded. Oh. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I know things are a little slow-paced, but character interactions and development reasons. Haha. Chapter 97 Trisha's Blade. Hey. Don't just flash your sword like that. Be careful when unsheathing. Come on. Trisha hurriedly turned and apologized to the passers-by who complained about her sudden unsheathing. As she did so, Ray noticed a thin wooden casing that hung behind her. It was placed so vertically that no one would notice it if she stood before them. The hilt was behind her, huh? It looks great, right? Ray's attention returned to the blade as Trisha presented it to him. Ray's eyes thoroughly observed the blade, and a pleasantly surprised expression took over his face a moment after. This looks really nice. May I? He asked, placing his hands forward to collect the blade. Sure. Just be careful. Ray nearly yanked the blade from the surprised Trisha, closely looking at the entire sword from the hilt, to the edges, and everything else about it. It's not the best I've seen, and it doesn't have any enchantment, but the workmanship is really good. Ray wasn't an expert in swords at all, but after checking out a ton of weapons from the ones that the hobgoblins wielded, to the more sophisticated kind, up to the most expensive ones in the capital, he had developed an eye for these things. His developed taste told him that the blade in front of him was of high quality. Whoosh. Swoosh. He flapped his hands slightly and swung the blade a few times, immersed in the weapon. Once he realized how he was obsessing over the sword, Ray cleared his throat and handed it back to the stunned Trisha. Ahem. This is a good sword. Alright. I can't believe I got it with just 1 gold. Trisha beamed as she stuttered. When others talked about this, Ray had gotten mad. But the same couldn't be applied to Trisha. This sword is probably worth more than 1 gold. If it was enchanted, it would enter the realm of platinum coins. Ray wondered how Trisha was able to get the sword. Where did you buy it from? Just a smithy in one corner before the road. I saw it on display and thought I just had to get it. And how much was the initial cost? Ray asked with even more intrigue. 3 gold coins. Sounds about right. Ray nodded internally. And? You haggled so hard he brought it down to 1. Trisha shook her head the moment Ray asked the question. I didn't have the heart to haggle. The guy who was selling it made the sword himself, and both of us knew the value it had. Well, I should have expected that. Ray nearly leaked out chuckle. Trisha was a martial artist to the core. The kind that believed in chivalry, honor, and all that junk. Frankly, Ray didn't care for any of it, but he still respected Trisha's continuous dedication to her ideal. So how were you able to get it for 1 gold? Well, I was going to go around and ask my friends to lend me their money, and I'd pay later. I told him I was definitely going to come back for the blade, but a warm smile radiated her face at this point. He decided to sell it to me for the money I had on hand. As Trisha finished her story, she sheathed the blade. I see. Ray could only mutter. The guy must have sensed the true martial artist spirit that Trisha exudes, and decided to sell it to her at a great discount. Ray chuckled internally as he looked at the ebony before him. I guess it sometimes pays to have that kind of mindset. It was also possible that the guy knew that Trisha had the prospects of being a powerful warrior and would feel indebted to him for this act of benevolence. So she would patronize him in the future and even introduce others to his shop. It is the place she bought her first sword. Martial artists and warriors dig that kind of stuff. Trisha could eventually lead a lot of customers his way through word of mouth, and the more her influence would grow, the more he was bound to have more people patronize him. In essence, it's a business strategy. Ray didn't know precisely what it was, since he hadn't been there himself, but he thought he was probably just overthinking it. There's nothing strange about a blacksmith giving out their prized creation to a warrior they feel deserves it. This was the irrational part of business that Ray knew existed. It really is a good sword. At this point, Ray didn't hide his smile. As Trisha kept bragging about her sword and the other adventures she had in the town, Ray could see the excitement on her face. In her eyes. Seems like she really had fun. The more I listen, the less apprehensive I become of her. Ray began to see Trisha in a different light. She wasn't just some girl boss who sought after strength and nothing else. She also wasn't so stern that she couldn't be light-hearted, though Ray considered her attempt at humor to be a little too extreme. He still felt a tingle under his pants once in a while. Overall, though, Trisha was ultimately a girl. A really nice girl. Still, I have to wonder. Ray glanced around him and saw that most of their classmates were already present. A lot of Trisha's friends were around as well. Why is she talking to me about all this stuff? At this point, Ray's eyes caught Alicia, who seemed to be walking away for some reason. When did she arrive? He thought, realizing he never saw her until just now. She looks a bit upset. Alicia didn't glance in his direction even once. I guess she's mad that I ditched her. Ray knew he had to apologize properly later, and perhaps give her the gift he held deep in his. For now, though, he had to continue his conversation with Trisha. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Looks like we have a wave of war brewing. Chapter 98, The Library Incident. Much to everyone's relief, no one was late to the rendezvous spot. The last couple of people to arrive only did so 3 minutes before time was up, so there were no issues at all. The students had shown just how responsible they could be in their adventures. I see this as a frequent thing. I saw a lot of things I want to check out tomorrow. Adonis, you better tell them how much we cooperated. The students all had refreshed, excited expressions on their faces. Truly, letting everyone go off on their own was the best choice Adonis could have made. And it paid off tremendously. The students returned to the royal estate without issues, and as they were gracefully greeted by the royal guards, they submitted their pass to Adonis, who was going to make sure they ended up where they were supposed to. The students didn't doubt him, and they were also assured that they would be able to frequently leave anytime they wanted. They just had to have a royal badge and a pass to do so. Every student got to keep their badge, but their pass was to be submitted once they got back to the castle. The rationale behind the latter being mandated was simply the council's way of indirectly monitoring the otherworlders that they summoned. By granting passes, they could know the total number of students who went out, and the time at which they did so. This was necessary for order, and since the regulation wasn't really infringing on the livery of the students, no one complained. Once the students arrived in their living quarters, they all went to shower. All. Without exception. It was a fun day, but walking around for hours inevitably caused sweat to form all over the body. After showering, a lot of the students remained in their rooms or the living room, discussing how they spent their time in length. Only a few chose to go outside. Billy, for one, went to train. Trisha went to try out her new sword. Alicia went to the library, and not long after, Ray also trailed along. Justin and one or two boys went out to test out the toys they bought from their adventures outside. And Adonis went to report the entire day to the higher UPS, not just as a matter of protocol, but also to assure them that everyone was well behaved. And that future excursions weren't going to be an issue. The otherworlders weren't wild beasts that had to be tamed. They were reasonable people. Sure, as teenagers, they wanted to have fun. However, they also had good hearts and wanted to help. Adonis hoped to present that image to the Royal Council. And, as always, he would succeed. Night had fallen already, and hours had elapsed since the excursion was concluded. Most students were already in their rooms, enjoying the much-needed sleep they required before the next day's expedition. However, out of the few who remained outside, 2 were awkwardly seated in the library. Alicia White, with a book shoved in her face, and Ray Schuyler, who also had a book shoved in his face. Both of them were yet to say a word to each other since they returned from the excursion. No, that wasn't quite right. Ray had tried, on many occasions, to initiate a conversation. However, he was only met with Alicia's cold response. Since he was something of an introvert, it didn't take long for him to stop trying and retract into his shell. The result was the current air of awkwardness that didn't want to leave the library. It was a wonder how both of them were able to read despite the obvious tension that pervaded the room. The truth was that they weren't reading. Both of them were distracted by the presence of the other to the point where they could simply not focus on any other thing. And then, "Are you mad at me?" Ray's loud voice echoed across the library. It had a trembling tone to it, almost as if he was afraid to ask. Afraid that she would say yes. "What makes you think that?" After moments of silence, Alicia's voice filled the room. The hearts of both students were racing. They could no longer even see the letters that were strewn over the pages of their books. "Because I ditched you today," Ray responded, his tone clearly depicting how he was treading carefully into uncharted territory. "And Anne?" At this point, Ray's face twisted into something akin to confusion. "What else makes you think that?" He hadn't thought beyond those actions of his. What else could he have done? Not apologizing sooner. He finally let out the only thing he could think of. And beads of sweat began to form on Ray's face at this point. What else was there? His heart racing and his brain was panicking, neurons fired within his skull as he pleaded with his mind to tell him the answer to the puzzling question. No skill in his arsenal could answer this question, so Ray felt stuck. He didn't give up though. He couldn't. Think. Then, as if his life was flashing before his eyes, Ray had an epiphany. A small smile formed on his face as he figured out the answer. "It's Trisha, isn't it?" His voice echoed out. What? What are you talking about?" "You saw me with Trisha and got mad, didn't you?" "What? That's not what happened." At this point, Alicia turned to Ray and she had flushes of red all over her face. Ray had never seen her look like that before. It was cute beyond compare. "Come on. Don't lie. Your face says it all." Ray doubled down on his words, slowly coming out of his shell. The fear and anxiety from early now vanished, replaced by a newfound confidence whose origin was unknown. So what if I was mad? You ditched me and went out with Trisha instead. The moment Alicia said this, Ray realized what the entire issue was. She's misunderstanding everything. Asterisk. 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 And so the tension begins. Man, I just like how these two relate. That doesn't mean I support their ship. But you gotta admit that they have a nice bond. Chapter 99 The Library Incident. Two students stood in their respective chairs and respective desks within the expansive library. One would expect this haven of silence to remain that way, especially since only two people occupied it. However, and no. You misunderstood. Since when did you two start? Never mind. You're both in beta class, so I should have already known. Hey, relax. I thought you were a loner and all, but I didn't know you had such friends. Noah. Trisha. No, Alicia, I. So you were such a ladies' man and I had no idea. What a. Alicia. Ray's voice was so loud in Alicia's ears that it startled her to another degree. The book she held flew out of her hands, falling to the floor. Right beside Ray's feet. Ray was right in front of her now, causing her heart to race to an extreme degree. Alicia had never heard him shout that loud before. Even his current expression. How he creased his brows and stood so imposingly in front of her. She had never seen this side of him before. Alicia. Ray's voice grew softer. How he had managed to close his distance from where he sat before was a mystery to her, but all she knew was that he was close. Too close. I'm sorry I ditched you like that. I went with Noah to get something, and I didn't want things to be awkward for you since we already had an earlier arrangement. Ray wasn't particularly lying, but he conveniently left out the part where he forgot about her entirely. So it wasn't awkward for Trisha to tag along? I guess it's fine for you three since you're in the B. Trisha didn't come with us. Yet. It was just Noah and me. I only saw Trisha once we met at the rendezvous spot. She was showing me her sword, since I have an interest in it. That's all. You like swords? Alicia's soft and curious tone told Ray that she was no longer upset. Still, he knew he wasn't out of the woods yet. I do. Not to an extreme level, but I think they're cool. Ray was now awkwardly scratching his face with a finger. A tinge of red appeared on his cheeks. I see. Sorry for misunderstanding. Alicia burst out into a small chuckle. That was enough for Ray to heave a sigh of relief. Arg. I can't believe I misunderstood. I feel like an idiot. And no, I can understand why you thought that. Ray smiled with understanding. The both of them sat beside each other now, and after calming down and sharing their side of the story, the truth became clear. No. No, I should have confirmed it with you. It's just. Arg. Never mind. Alicia's embarrassed face made Ray want to burst out into a loud chuckle, but he suppressed it. He hardly ever saw her uncomposed, and even when she chose to be casual with him, there was still this air of elegance unparalleled pristine around her. She had most of the control in their conversations. Especially when it came to her cats. But now. She was a total wreck. And Ray liked this side of her more than he expected. Am I a bad person for feeling this way? He wondered to himself. Alicia took successive sighs to calm herself, deeply inhaling and exhaling periodically, while also gently placing her hand on chest. Before long, she was fine. I actually got you something. Ray swiftly activated his behind him and yanked out the pristine box that contained his gift. Why, you did? Yeah. Ray popped out the box and dropped it on the desk that they both shared. Whoa. This is. Alicia's surprised expression when she saw the box alone pleased Ray. He instantly felt like everything was worth it. Ray pushed the box closer to her, so the pure white thing slid across the desk and reached her. Open it, he said. Alicia stared at him for a moment with her stunned expression, and then proceeded to do as she was told. This is. She exclaimed in both shock and immense joy. Throughout her stay in this world, she had never seen anything like the ring that gleamed before her. You like it? As Ray's question came in a whisper, she turned to smile at him. I love it. It's called the White Amber. I won it in a game. For you. Pink hues instantly appeared on Alicia's cheeks as she heard those words. Oh, really? She murmured, carrying the pure white ring and observing it thoroughly. The gem it has reminded me of your eyes. Ray went on to say. Oh, stop exaggerating. My eyes don't look as great as this. Despite Alicia's attempt to shrug off Ray's comment, he moved even closer and continued. No. They look even better. Stop it. You're embarrassing me. Nothing embarrassing in stating the truth. Alicia's cheeks grew even redder as she tried to look away from the boy beside her. Ray, stop. Please. Stop telling the truth. My goodness. You want me to lie? Ray gasped playfully. You know what I meant. No, I don't. You tell me. You. A small pout formed on Alicia's face, causing Ray to burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. Alicia heard him laugh and could not control her own reaction to it. Ha 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 ha. Before the two of them realized it, they had burst out into laughter, forever changing the ambience of the library. Alicia wore the ring in front of Ray, flexing her ring finger in front of him. How does it look on me? She beamed, her beauty complementing the gem on her fingers. Or was it the other way around? It looks amazing on you. Aw. Thank you. She grinned and stylishly curved her hair around. Ray and Alicia instantly burst out laughing, absolutely oblivious of the watching gaze of someone who stood right outside the library. This bulky silhouette had glowing blue eyes that seemed to show hints of green envy. His deep glare screamed with rage, and his clenched fists tightened so hard that his fingers dug into his palm. Ray. You. It's all your fault. As the young man growled, the grating sound of his teeth made an unpleasant noise around him. He didn't care, though. He was too focused on the sounds the two were making within the library. You're the one confusing Alicia. As his eyes sharply glowed even more, portions of his face were revealed. It was Billy McGuire. He was deep in thought, remembering the offer he had received earlier that day. And how he had refused it. I don't think I'll accept your proposal. He had told Eval's Redart. I don't need such an elaborate scheme to make Alicia fall for me. It's only a matter of time. Those words came to haunt him now. Billy had come here to apologize to her, to tell her he was sorry for how he raised his voice earlier in the day. He had hoped that doing that would calm her down, and they could begin building a solid relationship from there on out. He didn't mind if they started out as friends, since he already knew the destination of their relationship. But how? How could he have expected this outcome? "It's all your fault, Ray," Billy growled, hate completely consuming his soul. "Everything that happens next is all your fault." Asterisk. 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 Chapter 100 Introduction to Practical Training. The next day came in no time, and the students who had been preparing their minds to go on the dungeon expedition were greeted with the most shocking news. The dungeon expedition has been put on an indefinite hiatus. As Grand Master Conrad said this, surprise overtook the expressions of all the students. Once again, he was accompanied by both Brutus and Luciel, and his attire was regal. However, the forlorn expression he had was new. No one had ever seen him this serious or anxious before. The same face was given by both Luciel and Brutus. It was a grave, disappointed face. In contrast to this, however, the 28 students had multifarious expressions on their faces. Some were relieved that the expedition was cancelled either due to the fear of going there, or the prospects of spending the day exploring the town. Others, mostly the boys, and a few girls like Trisha, appeared disappointed to hear the news. They were most likely looking forward to fighting real monsters, so it was a major bummer to hear what Conrad was saying. Adonis doesn't look surprised. He must have already known. Ray had this thought as he stole a glance at the stoic hero. The rest of his classmates were buzzing with shock, so he joined them in it. However, Ray wasn't the slightest bit surprised. The last ounces of his shock had been exhausted the previous day. This news was already expected, especially when he thought about it rationally. They suspect that a very dangerous monster is on the loose within the dungeon, so it's currently not very safe for us. The reason why Brutus and Luciel went to check out the royal dungeon the previous day was to make sure there would be no surprises waiting for the students. And now, there was. "I'm sure those two are strong, and they are capable of protecting us within the earlier floors." But, Ray was also certain that they doubted their ability to look out for every single variable and prepare against surprise attacks. Dungeons were largely unpredictable, which was why scouting was essential. Right now, neither the Grand Mage nor Head Warrior could explain what had caused so much carnage within the royal dungeon. Unless they figured it out, or at least determined that the dungeon was largely safe, then it was no place they would allow their biggest prospects into. There have been some complications in the dungeon, which make it unsafe and unfit for training. Brutus and an elite few will have to thoroughly investigate the floors to ensure your safety. The Grand Master explained further. Ray smiled as he noticed how Conrad skirted around the details, choosing to be vague on purpose. He probably doesn't want to scare us. I can understand why. If the students truly knew how terrifying monsters could be, and the current unknown threat that was supposedly lurking within the dungeon, most of them would be discouraged from ever wanting to participate. Even after everything was finally resolved. I personally don't think a monster did this. It's probably the mastermind who's pulling the strings here. The actions that were involved here, like looting and harvesting, could only be done by something very intelligent. It was simply more reasonable to believe that a human did it than some unknown monster. By this goes to show that the male factor is powerful and very resourceful. They have more resources than me at this point too, so I have to be extra wary. Ray could almost guarantee that Brutus and his team wouldn't be able to find a single clue about the monster, so they were probably going to explore the dungeon very soon. I just need to gain an edge by killing some and not all the monsters in my free time, so I can level up faster. There's also that issue. Ray could feel his lips curling up when he heard something else that he should have expected. In the meantime, Lucielle and a select few others will be giving you a practical course. As Conrad said this, Lucielle managed to force her signature smile and waved at everyone. I'll let her explain. Conrad appeared to take a step back, and Lucielle bowed slightly before moving forward with her staple cheerful look. Okay, everyone. This is what we're going to do. The alternative to dungeon exploration wasn't a particularly terrible idea. It involved Lucielle and the few summoners of the United Human Alliance. This practical session would take place in a massive stadium that resembled a gladiator ring still situated within the royal estate. It was more than large enough to contain thousands of people, but for the purposes of the exercise, only 28 students and about 12 instructors, a total of 40 individuals, occupied the expanse. And what exactly would they be doing here? Well, it was both simple and complex. As I explained before, all of the instructors here are capable of using summoning magic. So, we're going to be summoning monsters for you to fight. It was that simple. Unlike tamers, summoners couldn't control the mind of whatever they summoned, hence the beasts had no allegiance to them. They also weren't limited to the summoning of living things, but for the purposes of their otherworlders, that was essential. Fighting monsters will give you a better understanding of how to fight against creatures who aren't humanoid. Killing them also gives you EXP, though to a limited degree. Summoned monsters possessed less EXP due to the nature of their summoning. They were also considerably weaker than the real thing, so it was only a natural conclusion that the EXP they gave wouldn't be as lucrative. Still, since they were still monsters, they could serve their purposes well. To be cannon fodder for the otherworlders who desired to grow. This will replace your dungeon expedition in the meantime, so try your best, okay? As Lucielle flashed her smile, a lot of students reacted with wide grins. Ray was among them, though his reason for doing so vastly differed from theirs. I know I shouldn't be excited since this is just a playground version of the real thing. And yet, his smile didn't stop growing. That was all because of one thing. I can't wait to test out my new class. Asterisk. Asterisk.